Welcome to another online story time of Holy Troublemakers and Unconventional Saints. This is a book of profiles and original portraits about people of different faiths who are working for more love and justice in their corner of the world. Some of them are modern day, and in fact, the last 2 weeks we've been able to have a special call in from the people whose profile I read because they are still with us. And some of them are historical figures, but who have a lot to teach us right now. I actually had a really hard time deciding whose profile to read this week because there is a lot going on in this week of April that different profiles highlight. So on the 21st, which was a few days ago, it was Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I posted a bit about that on social media. But for those of you who have the book at home, I really recommend going and reading Rabbi Regina Jonas's profile. She was the very first woman ever to be ordained as a rabbi, but it was in the 1930s in Berlin, Germany, and very sadly, she was killed in the Holocaust, and her story was almost lost to history. But thankfully, her papers were discovered after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and people are remembering her story now. I think it's a really important story to share, and I made sure parents and teachers, with the help and input of several readers, including another rabbi who is featured in the book, that the details included about the Holocaust are enough and also not overwhelming. It's a difficult time in history for us to talk about, but it's really important to make sure that we tell these stories, even when they're hard stories to tell sometimes. Also, today is the beginning of Ramadan, one of the most holy days, well, it's actually several weeks for Muslims. And so I wanted to read some of the Muslims' profiles, and that includes Annie Zonneveld, who is an amazing woman who is modern day. Also, this is Rabbi Keller. He's the one who helped me very much with Rabbi Regina Jonas's profile. A wonderful story that I hope to share at another story time. Madia Lynn, fantastic story of a modern day transgender Muslim woman in Chicago who has created a LGBT-friendly, woman-centric mosque. I highly recommend reading her profile. April is also National Poetry Month, which made me want to read Mary Oliver's profile. I love that portrait so much. And let's see, I have another one marked here. Maria Mulkara, another incredible Muslim woman featured in the book. Highly recommend reading her story. And I've got one more little one to show you. The poet Rumi, also for Poetry Month, and because Rumi is from a branch of Islam called Sufism. And so all of these profiles would be great to read for this week, but I decided that Earth Day was going to make me read Wangari Maathai's profile today. So we will talk a little bit more about Earth Day. That was yesterday, and I hope that we all found a little way to remember that. If not, we can do it now. Wangari's portrait is drawn by Deborah Guidi, an Italian artist. Wangari Maathai was the first at a lot of things. A biologist, she was the first woman in Central Africa to earn a Ph.D. She was the first woman to be the head of an academic department at the University of Nairobi. She was the first woman to hold the job of Minister of the Environment in Kenya. And in 2004, she became the very first African woman to receive a Nobel Peace Prize. Wangari's story begins in Ahithe, a small village in Kenya's highlands, where she was born in 1940. Wangari's parents had converted to Christianity, and they were part of the Kikuyu tribe, one of the main indigenous people who live in Kenya. Indigenous means someone who is native to a region, that their families and the ancestors who came before them have lived on and loved the land. Although Wangari grew up Catholic, her family's traditional Kikuyu beliefs still informed how they lived and thought about God. The Kikuyu believe that God, called Nagai, in the Kikuyu language dwells on Mount Kenya, the second tallest mountain on the African continent. The Kikuyu build their homes to face Mount Kenya, which reminded them daily where all good things come from. Near the ground is the Mugumo tree, a type of fig tree that is seen as one of God's sacred trees. Every morning as a child, Wangari collected firewood for her family. She could collect wood from any tree except the Mugumo tree. They left these trees alone because, as her mother explained, this is a tree of God. We don't collect wood from this tree. These fig trees lived a long and natural life. Later, as a trained biologist, Wangari realized that these sacred fig trees played a central role in the ecology of the land. And I want to point out again that there is a glossary at the back. Ecology is a word that I think is important to know to understand Wangari's story and the whole concept of Earth Day. So ecology is the relation of all living things, including bacteria, plants, animals, and human beings, to one another and their physical surroundings. So I'm going to go back to page 202. Sorry, I didn't say that originally. Her profile starts on page 200. And so I'm up here for those of you following along in the book. Later, as a trained biologist, Wangari realized that those sacred fig trees played a central role in the ecology of the land. Because the Mugumo trees were sacred and allowed to live long lives, their roots grew deep into the bedrock below the surface of the earth. The roots cut into the rock and allowed subterranean water to flow up closer to the surface. Their vast root systems also stabilized the soil, protecting the region from landslides. A really incredible tree. The roots are going way down into the bedrock and helping draw up water closer to the surface. It's stabilizing all of the land. So if there's major rains, because this is up in the highlands of Kenya, a really important tree. But when Wangari went away to university and graduate school, the lands where she grew up underwent a major change. Trees, even the sacred trees, were cut down to make room for large farms and other development. Not only did this destabilize the soil, but the farms often polluted the water sources. So women and girls, whose job it was in those societies to get the water, had to walk long distances to find clean water. And these long walks were dangerous. In 1977, at the first ever United Nations meeting on women's rights, Wangari heard the stories of these women, and she realized something had to be done. While the problem was complicated, she knew one small, tangible step that would add up to a big difference. I think we should plant trees, she told the assembly. She received some quizzical looks. Not everyone knew what she knew about trees and the land. That was okay, she decided. They would learn. That was the birth of the Greenbelt movement, an organized effort to plant trees led mostly by poor, rural Kenyan women. Unfortunately, politicians and developers opposed the women who planted trees and tried to stop them at every turn. Planting trees is a kind of ecological form of civil disobedience, Wangari later reflected. And I want you to, if you have the glossary, let's look up civil disobedience too, because I also think that's an important word to understand. Oops. Civil disobedience, the act of refusing to obey certain laws as a form of peaceful protest. So often civil disobedience is used in marches and other things, boycotts, any type of thing to oppose a law that appears to be unjust peacefully. So that's a type of civil disobedience, and Wangari thinks that actually just planting a tree is part of that. She faced all kinds of resistance from the politicians in charge who only wanted economic development, the kind of development that would lead to their own pockets being lined with money. She was called names, put into prison, and even beaten. But Wangari kept planting trees. The first year, Wangari only planted 7 trees, and 5 of those seedlings died. But the 2 remaining trees are still alive today. And collectively, Wangari and the many women who joined her have now planted over 51 million trees in Kenya and many other countries. In Kenya, a tree is a sign of peace, so it's especially fitting that Wangari received the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of her work. In her acceptance speech, she explained that many conflicts around the world are actually caused by ecological crises. Planting trees and paying attention to the balance in nature helps reduce major conflicts that often turn violent. When we plant trees, we plant the seeds of peace and hope, she said. And the prompt for her profile is, what are ways you could help make peace by taking care of the earth? I think you can see why I really wanted to read her profile for Earth Day this week. She is such a beautiful, unconventional saint and holy troublemaker for us right now, especially because the earth really needs a lot of our attention. She has a really interesting point that I had not thought of before researching her, and that is that a lot of the major conflicts in the world, if you go to the root of it, it's often about some sort of crisis in nature, whether it be polluted water or not enough water, or there's been major devastation to the land because of overdevelopment, things that usually it comes back to us humans having not taken care of nature very well. And one of the things I like to point out that I really learned through the research in this book is why we really need to listen to the indigenous people of a region. So indigenous, I'll go back to this definition. Her family is from the Kikuyu tribe in Kenya, which are one of the main indigenous groups in that region. And indigenous is simply the people whose ancestors are the original inhabitants of the land. They've been caring for that land for thousands of years, and they really know what that land needs. Sometimes it's in the mythologies and the stories and traditions. So for example, in Wangari's case, her mother would tell her when she went out to collect firewood that we don't get it from the sacred fig tree because that is a tree of God. And that tradition had been passed down and was actually helping the entire ecosystem be stable, because these beautiful trees were allowed to live a very long life, and they were stabilizing the soil. They were drawing up water from the bedrock so that it could be accessible closer to where people lived. And so the indigenous people of a region really know and care about the land. And it made me realize that as somebody who cares about the environment and for taking care of the earth, that one of the first things that I need to do is listen to the indigenous people group in the region where I live. I live in a part of the country that for 10,000 years the Cherokee have been living on and taking care of. And so if I want to know how to take care of this entire region, it's really important to listen to the elders and the people who know that land for thousands of years. So that's something I really wanted to make sure that we emphasized in this story time, is finding out who the indigenous people group in your area are. The great likelihood is that they are still there and still caring for the land and still working for clean water and for the land to be able to be healthy, because indigenous people know that we are all connected deeply to the land, and the health of the land affects all of us. There's a wonderful website that you can use to look up your town and to find out who the indigenous people who've originally cared for that land on. Sometimes, in some countries, when they have graduation ceremonies and other public events, they are starting to publicly acknowledge the land on where they are right now. So, for example, where I live, that would be Cherokee land. Where I used to live in Southern California, there was a couple of different Native American tribes whose land that had been But anywhere in the world, there's somebody who the indigenous people of that land know that land really well. And so trying to come alongside indigenous people and what they're doing to protect the land is one way that we can help the earth and everybody who depends on the earth for our health and for our well-being. It is, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, spring right now, and that is a wonderful time to talk about planting things, whether that be trees or plants. I happen to live in the mountains, so we don't need a lot of trees where we are. We really needed that where we used to live in Southern California. We could use more trees. But I have never planted a garden since I did a few times when I was a little kid, but as an adult, I have never planted a garden. And so this year we are planting a garden and we are learning about the magic of growing things. So I have a few seeds to show you. My elder daughter planted this. It's a nasturtium, and that's actually going to be an edible type of flower that we can put on salads. And also just because they're beautiful, I have several more seedling trays like this. These are going to be tomatoes, and they're actually called hillbilly tomatoes, which I thought was a pretty funny name given that we live in the Appalachian Mountain Ranges of North Carolina. So I'm really excited because I know homegrown tomatoes are amazingly delicious, and I'm hoping that they'll be enough that we can share with our neighbors too. And that's one way I think Wangari would be really pleased, as if we were growing things, especially things that we might be able to share with others. One way we can celebrate the earth is by just noticing what's around us. My older daughter made this as a headdress of sorts for me, and she's learned from a teacher of hers who loves the forest to offer a little gift to say thank you to a plant when you pick it. This vine came from a vine that was actually hurting a little tree, so she trimmed it off to help the tree, and these are dogwood flowers, and they're so beautiful. This is the first time in my life I've lived near dogwoods, and I am loving seeing the dogwoods everywhere. So just noticing what's growing around us and appreciating it, saying thank you. I think one of the things that we're going to try as a way to notice what the earth gives us is just saying a gratitude before we eat. We tend to do that anyway, but it doesn't always include the earth as something that we're thanking. And I think that would be a wonderful thing to add in. I'd love to hear any ideas you have of how you're trying to honor the earth and help make peace in your area. Maybe that's picking up trash out of rivers or along roadsides. Maybe that's helping plant trees or community gardens. I know we can't be around each other right now, so maybe we're planting individual gardens and then we can share in the community. But what is some little way that you're taking care of the earth? One other thing that actually has come out of this COVID-19 shelter in place for me is I had always wanted to move our family to reusable napkins, cloth napkins, because we were using paper towels or napkins at every meal. And I thought that feels like a waste. It comes from trees, and trees are something that we need more of in this world because they help our air be healthy. We breathe because of them. So we got some cloth napkins, and the paper shortages of paper towels and toilet paper and things like that have meant that we have really stepped into using cloth napkins right now. So that's been a really simple thing. And I'm curious, what are you doing right now? What's something in your family that you're doing to help the earth be just a little bit healthier right now? Because when we all work together, it makes a huge difference. Even all of us staying at home right now, we're not using very much gasoline. The air is a lot cleaner in a lot of places. So some of these practices we could carry forward even after the shelter in place isn't quite as strict as it is right now. So thanks so much for tuning in for this story time with Wangari Maathai. And again, I'd love to hear from you. holytroublemakers.com and click the contact link, or you can email support@watchfire.org and just tell me, what are some ways that you are helping make peace by taking care of the earth? What's one little thing that you might be doing right now? I'd love to hear that, because Earth Day is one day out of the year, but of course we need to take care of our earth. It is our one home for all of us every day. I'd like to end on a little blessing, a little song for the earth, a little gratitude for her that my older daughter Lily wrote for us.
Thank you, Earth, for growing me. Thank you, Earth, for caring. Thank you, Earth, for loving me. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for the rise of the sun, the rosy rays against the horizon. Thank you, Earth, for the starry sky, the bright lights against the canopy called night. Thank you, Earth, for growing me. Thank you, Earth, for caring. Thank you, Earth, for loving me. Thank you, thank you.